All right, so today's lesson that we're going to be going over is coming from the book of Exodus. It's chapter 16, verses 2 through 15, and it comes, finds the Israelites in the wilderness after they've been liberated from Egypt. And just a little bit about Exodus before we start. Exodus is kind of the centerpiece book of the Torah. It's that story that every Jewish Israelite person knows, especially in the time that these were written. That these were very important culturally to the Israelite people. The story of God choosing this people, lifting them up out of slavery, and bringing them to their promised land. So it's a very foundational story for the Jewish identity, which can kind of make it tough for modern Christians to identify with, because it is a story that is written by an oppressed people for an oppressed people. So contextually, it can make it kind of tough for us as American Christians to identify with. So it's a little bit tougher. Some Christians around the globe, particularly in Latin America, really identify with this story because of kind of the oppression and the marginalization that they experience down in Central America. Exodus is kind of broken up into three sections. In chapters 1 through 5, that kind of makes up the part of the story where the Lord hears the cries of the oppressed slaves, calls a prophet, Moses, to lead them to freedom. And then in chapters 5 to 18, it's kind of a really quick section where it tells of the people kind of walking through the wilderness. And then 19 and on comes the long section where the revelation of God's laws that guide their life kind of come to be. So it's a very longer, a little bit more monotonous, less narratively intriguing section. But like I said, it's a book meant for kind of peasant people, to give them hope, to give them something, to kind of a salvific hope to fix their eyes on, that they will be lifted up and brought out of their oppressed state. And I particularly, one of my trips to El Salvador, this book came up quite a bit in our discussions with Christians in that country, as kind of a very important text that they were rooted in. Latin American liberation theology is something that's starting to take hold quite a bit, and liberation theology is the theology of that God is on the side of oppressed people and is going in and doing the work to lift them up out of their oppression, which is tough for a lot of people to really kind of grapple with, because it's God taking sides, quite literally, which is a tough thing for us to kind of wrap our heads around. It was a tough thing for me to wrap my head around when I was going down there, because I had always come from this mindset that God, was a universal God. God loved everybody. God doesn't take sides. But then you read the book of Exodus, and the Egyptians that are at the bottom of the river, after God washes the river back over them, washes the Red Sea back over them, would kind of disagree that God does actually take sides, and does so pretty forcefully in this book. So that's kind of the background context of the book of Exodus. There's quite a bit going on in the book. It's a really great story too. And then you kind of get into the laws, which are very popular in some of the other Torah texts. So this week's story, again, is coming from chapter 16, verses 2 through 15, and it reads as follows. From Elim they set out again, and the whole community of the Israelites reached the wilderness of Sin, which is between Elim and Sinai, on the 15th day of the second month after they left Egypt. They began to complain against Moses and Aaron there in the wilderness. The people of Israel said to them, "If only we had died by Yahweh's hand in the land of Egypt, then when we sat next to pots of meat and ate our bread till we were filled. But now you have brought the whole community out into this wilderness to die of hunger." Then the Lord said to Moses, "Look, I will rain down bread from heaven for you. The people will go out and gather a day's portion every day so that I can test them to see if they will follow my instructions. On the sixth day, when they prepare what they brought in, it will be twice as much as the daily gathering." So Moses and Aaron said to the Israelites, "In the evening you will know that it was the Lord who brought you up out of Egypt. And in the morning you will witness the glory of God, the one whom you directed your complaints. For who are we that you should complain to us?" Moses continued, "It is the Lord who will give you meat in the evening for your meal and all the bread you want in the morning, because the Lord has heard your complaints. For it is not us that you are complaining. Who are we? But rather it is to the Lord." Then Moses said to Aaron, "Tell the whole Israelite community, present yourselves before the Lord who has heard your complaints." As Aaron was speaking to the whole Israelite community, they looked toward the desert, and there was the glory of the Lord appearing in the form of a cloud. Then the Lord spoke to Moses and said, "I have heard the complaining of the people of Israel. Say this to them: in the evening you will eat meat, and in the morning you will have your fill of bread. Then you will know that I, the Lord, am your God." So it came about in the evening, quail flew in and all around the camp. And in the morning there was a layer of dew all around the camp. And when the layer of dew evaporated, there on the surface of the desert were flakes of something, delicate, powdery, fine as frost. And when they saw this, the people of Israel said to each other, "What is it?" Not knowing what it was. But Moses told them, "This is the bread the Lord has given you to eat." So that story kind of appears in multiple books. There's a similar story in the book of Numbers. I want to say it's Numbers 21, where the people complain. They're hungry. They are, I can't blame them for being a little bit hangry and a little bit tired of being hungry. So they start complaining. They're voicing this need, and in Numbers, it often in the text itself, it's interpreted as kind of an affront to God, and they're punished with a plague for it. And that's kind of how these types of texts are interpreted pretty popularly, is that there is a response from God to kind of put this complaining people in line. You should be okay with what you have. Why are you complaining? But in Exodus, it being a liberative kind of story, there's a little bit of a different tone to this. Rather than God kind of coming down on the Israelites for complaining, God still meets their needs. And it's out of that complaining, out of what we would kind of consider people to be being ungrateful, that their needs are met. And it is a really crucial need for them to meet. They are out in this wilderness. They're doing very physical work of journeying through the hot wilderness, and they need to be sustained. And they feel that they're not, so they start complaining. They start raising their voice. They start letting it be known that they are not being fed. And so God responds in kind. And I think that that's one of the interesting things for me about this text, is how, again, there is a physical need met. In our last Bible study, we talked about how physical needs are met before spiritual needs can be met. And I think of the story of Jesus feeding the 4,000 in the book of Matthew, where Jesus is doing miracles and everybody's kind of amazed. And then he's like, these people need to be fed too. And that's ultimately what he leaves this group with, is having fed them. He doesn't kind of perform miracles and then just leave. He feeds them. He meets those needs without even having to be asked. And so that's kind of a kind of the theme that I'm pulling from this text today, that I'm kind of reading out of it, is that there's some beneficial things that can come from tension. There's some beneficial things that can come when the pot is stirred, so to speak. We can have needs met, things kind of can fall away. And that's something that I think is really important to really living into a quote unquote Christian life, is being able to pull the positive from the tense moments in life. This story is also too about a mindset of abundance, that God will provide. God talks about how they will be fed for those 6 days, and even on that sixth day, they will be provided for twice over, so that they can rest on the seventh day, and that they can preserve that Sabbath day. So even on the days where it doesn't seem like there's enough to go around, there really is. And that's something that's very important, that Exodus is trying to instill within its readers, is that the abundance of God's resources are plenty for everyone, and there will be enough left over for a seventh day. And that's kind of reflected in the feeding of the 4,000 story as well, in the fact that there are leftovers from that meal. There's 7 baskets worth of leftovers, which kind of harkens to the 7 days of creation, and that there is enough abundant resources for every single day of those 7 days. So that is kind of what I've got for this text today. So I will open it back up to you to kind of see what your reactions are before we get into our discussion questions.